For the most part, I tend to play a majority of new games released every year that at least pique my interest, and then I'll throw in a random classic or legacy title in every now and then. 2024 was filled with huge hits and huge misses, and of those 17 games I played, here's 10 that stood out at least to me. Usually the pool's a little more than this, but a lot of these games were actually pretty lengthy. Number 10, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Speaking of games that were lengthy, the new entry in the Prince of Persia series is a Metroidvania-styled game that took over 30 hours to complete. Truthfully, I wasn't expecting the game to drag on as long as it did. I dug the new protagonist, Sargon, the platforming, and the surprises the story offered, but the gameplay gimmicks were simply adequate, lacking the inventiveness that the Sands of Time games and even the 2008 reboot had.
That's 1 minute. Requesting air support!
Number 9, Helldivers 2. This game exploded in winter of 2024. It was all I heard about amongst my limited circle of friends in terms of what to join in on. Given other things going on, I couldn't jump aboard the hype train until that summer. Too little too late, I guess, but sinking 20-ish hours into the game had me understand the hype behind everything. It very much felt like what Overwatch, Halo, Call of Duty, Perfect Dark, and GoldenEye were when they first debuted. Number 8, Black Myth: Wukong. Quick story here. In Christmas of 2023, I was gifted the book The Journey to the West, and I read it earlier on in 2024. It was coincidence that around getting halfway through the book, I learned a sort of game adaptation was on its way. It kind of felt like destiny, you know? So here's the thing with Black Myth: Wukong. There's so much about this game that's amazing. There's spectacle. There's great mechanics once when you get the feel. If you go the extra mile, you get bonuses. Yet for all of that, there's issues I had with glitches, invisible walls, and the occasional boss that I felt like I won out of pure luck versus skill. Its story does harken back to the book a good bit, which was appreciated, and I do look forward to eventually revisiting the game. Number 7, Animal Well. One dude made this game in nearly its entirety. One dude who's an infamous gamer YouTuber and his team helped publish it. What am I doing with my life? Anyway, whereas Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown as a whole felt like a very good Metroidvania game, Animal Well manages to add something new to the formula, that being offering button timing challenges with minimal combat, which that alone is a win. Graphical limitations aside, perhaps the only way it could triumph further is if Bowser's Big Bean Burrito was included, or if it was part of Donkey Kong December. Number 6, Penny's Big Breakaway. It's the team that made Sonic Mania's first project independent from Sega's Shroud, and luckily the game's mostly a blast. I still have this weird sense that the game started as a 3D Sonic-styled game evoking the Sega Saturn kind of feel, and gradually turned into this, whereas Sega moved on to Sonic Superstars. The vibrant colors, whimsical levels, solid soundtrack, tight controls all contribute to a beyond impressive game where there's really nowhere to go but up from here. Before moving on to the top 5, here's some honorable mentions. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection was a bigger announcement than I think Nintendo gave it credit for. I played MVC2 a bunch a long while ago, and it was awesome to revisit it for a good amount of time. Adding to that were a bunch of new titles I never tried, such as The Punisher, which felt safe by today's standards, but I'm sure was notable back in its heyday. Sonic Triple Trouble on the Game Gear was fine on its own, but the 16-bit reimagining makes it feel like something found in a time capsule all these years later. Does enough to tribute the original game, does enough to distinguish itself. Number 5, The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Save for another game on this list, this was one of the most anticipated games for me in 2024. It's a new Zelda game made by Grezzo, who made the 2019 version of Link's Awakening, starring Zelda this time, and the mechanics were different. There were some excellent callbacks, and the amount of imagination that the player could use to complete goals does make this game unique. But why did it have to be so long? Look, Tears of the Kingdom took 120 hours to get all the way through, but things like Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, Link's Awakening and such all take roughly 10 to 12 hours. This one took about 30 for me, and no doubt most of the time was cycling between what summons to use. Honestly, the game's real good, and I'm sorry if I'm nagging or whatever, but it lacks replay value and memorable music. Number 4, Shadow Generations. I'm in the minority here, but I find Sonic Generations to be fine amongst the entire catalog. The gameplay and level design is tight, but since the first playthrough, I never really felt like I was experiencing anything new or original. So, when the remaster was announced paired with a new Shadow campaign, I didn't really care. That is until I started seeing what the Shadow campaign offered. First off, it's borrowing a lot of things from Sonic Frontiers, my favorite game of 2022. Next up, there's an open area to explore and do mini challenges in between, which kind of ended up being my favorite part, save for some great reimaginings in the likes of Kingdom Valley and Space Colony Arc. Finally, it doesn't overstay its welcome, adds new layers to Shadow's character, and adds more context for the base game of Sonic Generations. Number 3. Astrobot. I didn't really grow up around the PlayStation catalog, but I was around it enough due to friends owning the console and games. Astro's Playroom was probably one of the most impressive glorified tech demos I've ever experienced, and the fact that Astrobot was going to be a full-fledged game was exciting alone given that. What I wasn't expecting was Super Mario Galaxy 3. Yeah, I've seen the joke tossed around too many times as well, but it was my immediate thought when playing it, and it's not a bad thing. If Freedom Planet was a cool alternate Sonic game, Tunic was a cool alternate Zelda game, then Astrobot is a cool alternate Mario game. Seriously, the game's delightful, and evokes such a sense of wonder and joy that feels more and more uncommon nowadays. Number 2, Hi-Fi Rush. When this one was shadow dropped back in 2023 on Xbox X consoles, I was fuming because I chose PS5 over Xbox X. It looked so sick. Even just from the launch trailer, there was style and charm that grabbed me. I love my PS5 though, and I was contemplating getting the Series X because my one is dying anyhow, but luckily the game made its way to PS5 in 2024. It was a day one purchase for me, and somehow the game was even better than I thought it would be. A vast soundtrack drives a rhythmic action platformer that never feels like it cheats out on encounters or challenges. Every level and boss fight offers something new to experience, and its chipper attitude is a nice gloss that covers its commentary. However, it was when the credits rolled and Zwan's Honestly played that it really hit home for me. That's a song I hadn't heard in years, and it fit Hi-Fi Rush perfectly. It was one of those nostalgia bombs that hit at the right time, and now, frankly, belongs to this game. Number 1, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Truth be told, when making this list, Hi-Fi Rush was at the top, but then I remember that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is considered a game. Here's the thing, I legitimately don't think I'll experience anything like what Final Fantasy VII Rebirth offered maybe ever again unless somehow Part 3 ends up being grander. This is a lengthy, comprehensive, detailed, heartfelt, inspiring, joyous video game that you just lose yourself in. You know how when something like Christmas ends and you kind of feel off for a bit because you're moving on to the new year? Or, marathoning a TV show and getting really sucked into the story and such and then it ends? Rebirth did that for me once I wrapped up playing it. Would I suggest Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for anyone to play? Well, sure. It's honestly a game that has very fun, intuitive combat with a plethora of mini-games and a difficulty curve that caters to anyone. I don't know if you'll be wowed by it or anything, but it's absolutely recommended to any Final Fantasy fan, anyone who's of course played 2020's remake, and those who are looking for that next big itch regarding getting lost within a world. Just play 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake first though, then Rebirth, then the original game, it's incredible, then the weird compilation stuff, I could go on and on. It's that phenomenal. If for some reason you're seeing this and have made it this far, this channel's meant to be a journal of sorts, but nonetheless, thanks so much for checking it out. So, what were your favorite games from 2024?